Welcome back. 2 weeks ago, Professor Sir Martin Evans won the most coveted award in science, the Nobel Prize for Medicine. Known as the godfather of stem cells, Sir Martin shares the award with 2 American scientists for their pioneering work in gene technology. Their research involves replicating human diseases by making genetic changes to the stem cells of mice. This breakthrough, known as gene targeting, is helping the drive to develop new treatments for human diseases. And I spoke about all of this to Sir Martin earlier. Can you explain the function of a stem cell to people who don't know?
I'll certainly try to. I find it difficult, but just imagine our body's made up of a lot of different types of cells, of building blocks, so skin cells, muscle cells, liver cells, cells in the front of your eye. They're all different. And during development, they all start from the one fertilized egg. And this then will divide and divide, and the progeny of those cells will become different. Now, one of the things we've discovered in biology over the years is that this is a very stable end, and that makes good sense. I mean, if you cut yourself, you don't expect a bit of liver to grow on your finger. It obviously is going to be determined in which direction it goes. Now, these embryonic stem cells, which I discovered, come from the very early embryo stage, and those cells still have the ability to go in any direction. And this is a remarkable property. And the other remarkable thing about them is we were able to isolate them from the very early embryo into tissue culture. Now, in the early embryo, there's only about 1 or 2 dozen of them. But in tissue culture, we can have them in tens of millions.
Tens of millions?
Oh, yes, or hundreds of millions. And that allows us to, and the important point is that these cells in tissue culture, every one of them, if we grow up a little colony from it, and then put it back, just a few cells back into an embryo, that embryo can develop, and I'm talking about mice, can develop into a mouse. And that mouse can actually breed. So if it's a male mouse, the sperm can have come from your cell in the Petri dish. That means I've got 10 million potential different sperm donors in the Petri dish. We want to be able to find out what genes do.
And what is the reason that, in America particularly, Christian groups and so on object to stem cell research? Now, is that because in fact, you take from the embryo after 5 days, or what is the reason?
It's exactly that. Now, all the work that I was talking about just now, and the work for which we've been awarded this Nobel Prize, is to do with mice. But now, these days, similar embryonic stem cells have been made from human embryos. And that's the rub. They're made from a human embryo. And this will be a spare IVF embryo, one that's not needed for reproductive purposes. And of course, there's a lot of ethical and moral debate in using human embryos. In the UK, under strict licensing, it is legal. But in some other countries, it's disputed. And in the United States, for instance, although there is no legislation whatsoever, unlike the UK situation, it's sought to have been controlled by denying federal funds for any of these type of studies.
Right, and that's the part. And if you had to summarize what you would like to achieve before you die, I'm not suggesting that is at all a close event, long into the future, what is the dream target?
Well, may I say what I've already achieved is to set up the most amazing technique that is allowing huge inroads into our knowledge. So what I think is the most important thing here, practical applications are very important, but I think they come after the intellectual knowledge that we gain from this. And actually, understanding this biological world, which has been a progress of science over the last 100, 150 years, and I'm sure will go on for centuries to come, is one of the biggest intellectual achievements of mankind.
It clearly is. Thank you so much for being with us, Sir Martin, and taking us so clearly through all of this.
Thank you very much.
We appreciate it very much indeed.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
We turn now again to Turkey. All eyes are still on Ankara this week. Last week, you remember, the Turkish parliament authorised a military offensive into northern Iraq. So will Turkey invade? So far, it still seems likely, possible, probable. We'll find out in a minute. 12 more Turkish soldiers were killed this week by the Kurdish rebel group, the PKK, followed by intense raids by the Turkish military on PKK positions. So does Turkey really mean business? And what does this mean for its relationship with its neighbours and allies? Joining me to discuss all this and more now are Dr. Gulnur Aybet from Kent University. Hello. Welcome. And Dan Sreebny from the US Embassy, a senior diplomat. Welcome to you. Welcome to you both. Let's start. Where do you think we are on the crucial question of real military engagement today?
I think the key issue here is how the Turkish government is going to assess whether words that have been spoken as assurances from the international community and as well as from Baghdad and the northern Iraqi Kurds is going to translate into deeds. And we've already seen the words concrete deeds used by Miliband and Rice, but the key here is whether the Turkish government can make an assessment whether those words will turn into deeds.
And what are the deeds? What are the deeds that the Turks will be looking for?
I think Foreign Minister Babacan made that very clear when he visited Baghdad earlier this week, and he had certain demands that had to be met, such as cutting off logistical supplies to the PKK, closing down their camps, and also the extradition of PKK leaders to Turkey, which I think the last one will be a sticking point, because I think it'll be quite difficult for Baghdad or the KRG to deliver in the short run.
Let's turn now to you, Dan. Is your assessment similar to Gulnur's or not?
In many ways, the issue to begin with is not the issue of Turkey and Iraq, it's the issue of a terrorist organization, which is what the PKK is, and the terrorist actions they have taken that has resulted in the deaths of many Turks, including the ones you just mentioned this past weekend. And we have joined many other countries and leaders in those countries, including in Iraq, in condemning those activities. The people of Turkey and the government of Turkey have every right to demand that action be taken to stop this terrorist organization. And we are working with the Turkish government and the Iraqi government, as they are now with each other, to find effective ways to do so that don't destabilize the situation in northern Iraq. And we are fully committed to this. And we have seen some positive signs in the past week in response to the terrorist actions of the PKK by both governments and by allies of both governments.
And in terms of the PKK, how many PKK from Turkey are now in northern Iraq?
I can't say. I've seen different analysis, but it is hard to say. It is a small number. This is not a huge organization, but it is one that has done damage, that has killed both military and innocent civilians, both Turks and foreigners in Turkey over the past decades. It's one that has taken advantage of a very difficult terrain in northern Iraq. And it is one that requires cooperation by Turkey and Iraq, including the regional government in northern Iraq, to take effective action with the support of the United States and other countries.
And what is that effective action? It's local military action to arrest or kill these members of the PKK who are in northern Iraq?
Well, officials in both countries, both civilian and military, are talking about a variety of steps, and it will take a variety of steps to stop the PKK, including cutting off their financial support, cutting off their logistical support, their ability to move, as well as looking at the places where they operate. And we have seen, you've had the Foreign Minister of Turkey, Ali Babacan, in Iraq recently. We now have the Iraqi Minister of Defense and a delegation, security delegation in Ankara. And of course, in late September, they had an agreement against terrorism. And it is perhaps one reason why the PKK is taking the action now that they did, in hopes of causing trouble and trying to divide the two countries. In fact, it's encouraging the two countries with others to work together more strongly and more quickly, because as Dr. Aybet said, it's going to be very important that action be taken, that the Turkish people feel that action is being taken.
Yes.
Yes, it is important that they feel that, obviously.
Well, it's not just how the obviously public opinion is very important here, but also, I mean, there's a position of the government. Now they have the parliamentary vote. They will feel that they will have to act on that at some point if nothing is met. And also, I mean, there has been this memorandum of understanding, which you mentioned, that was signed with the Baghdad government. But there have been a series of trilateral talks as well, which a lot of attention has been focused on between the Baghdad regime, United States and Ankara, which have produced no results at all. So in actual fact, the Turkish government's patience has absolutely run out with talks. That's why I think the message generally from Turkey about the talks today with the Iraqi defense minister was this is actually the last chance for diplomacy.
And if the Turkish patience wears out completely, what do they do then?
Well, I think, you know,
they declare war or what?
I think this talk of full-scale military incursion is rather simplistic. I mean, there are different levels of responses which the Turkish military will have already prepared for. I mean, it could be an escalation of the present shelling and hot pursuit kind of operations. It could be a deeper incursion. It could be the setting up of a buffer zone, which is no more than 10 kilometers into northern Iraq. So there are different military options depending on the situation and also depending on what kind of results are going to be achieved from these talks, whether, you know, the Turkish government can actually work with the Iraqi government on certain issues like cutting the logistical supply.
And so if the talks don't work, that could be a new American nightmare in a way, couldn't it?
Well, we have two countries that are both important partners and for the United States, but they are also important partners to each other. If you look at the relations between Turkey and Iraq, Turkey has been very supportive of the importance of maintaining a unified, peaceful Iraq in the last few years and in the years before that. It has also been important for the economic development and prosperity in northern Iraq, in the Kurdish regional government area. This is a relationship that benefits both sides, and the PKK and the terrorist actions of the PKK and the need to stop it is the only major challenge preventing further progress on this.
Thank you both very much indeed for being with us. And I'm afraid that's all we've got time for this week. My thanks to all of our guests, and do join us again, same time, next week. Until then, goodbye for now.